Rod Serling was a soldier before he was a storyteller, a paratrooper dropped into nightmares, a first-hand witness to how quickly humanity collapses under pressure. He came home from war and watched America fall asleep in front of its own reflection, sitcoms, jingles, and a smiling mask stretched over trauma. He wanted to speak on injustice, on racism, on corruption, on the machine that chews up people and spits out products. But the censors bled his scripts dry. Every time he said something real, they told him to quiet down. So he got clever. He moved the battlefield to the stars. If you set the story on Mars, suddenly it wasn't about race. If the villain was a robot, it wasn't about politics. If a man broke down in a simulation, it wasn't about society collapsing, it was science fiction. But we knew. He used aliens as stand-ins, time loops as metaphors, and cosmic horror to talk about the ordinary horror nobody wanted to face. And he did it in a voice that didn't ask for permission. It told the truth in code. The Twilight Zone wasn't escapism. It was a smuggled message, a survival tactic, a way to speak in a world that only listens when it's entertained. And Serling, he didn't just unlock the door, he rigged the whole building with mirrors. The Twilight Zone wasn't built for jump scares, it was built for reflection, and not the flattering kind, the kind that holds your gaze a second too long and makes you flinch. Each episode was a mirror, polished with fiction and angled just right to catch you off guard, not because it shocked you, but because it recognized you. Take The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street. A quiet suburb turns on itself not because of aliens, but because suspicion is louder than reason. It's not a story about them. It's a story about us. How fast neighbors become threats when fear sets the tempo. Or Time Enough at Last, where a man begs for solitude and gets it in a dead world. His glasses break. That's the twist, but the real fracture was his priorities all along. And Eye of the Beholder slices deeper. A woman is told she's hideous until we see what normal looks like. It isn't a makeup gag, it's a scalpel to the idea of conformity, of beauty as obedience. Then there's It's a Good Life, a godlike child with no guidance, no consequences. What people call twists in the Twilight Zone weren't cheap tricks, they were revealings, unmaskings. You thought you were watching them until the credits roll and you realize you were watching you. Serling didn't use fantasy to escape reality, he used it to expose it, not as a warning, as a confession. The Twilight Zone didn't drift in from another galaxy, it oozed up from beneath 1950s America. The clean lawns, the Cold Wars, the televisions flickering like artificial hearths. It spoke in code, but the message was unmistakable. This world is haunted by what it refuses to face. Rod Serling understood. The real horror wasn't in some shadowy monster, it was in the human reading the newspaper, sipping his coffee, pretending not to notice his own unraveling. The true Twilight Zone was never out there, it was right here, just under the surface of our own smiling mechanical lives. Automation was creeping in, identity was becoming a commodity, mass media was rewiring thought, and suburbs were sanctuaries built on anxiety, everyone pretending nothing was wrong, even as the air got thicker with dread. That's why the Twilight Zone feels liminal. It's the space between the mask and the face, the moment before the lights go out, the hallway you enter but never quite leave. And it never needed to say it directly because the atmosphere was doing the talking, the ticking clocks, the static, the perfect houses with something rotten in the basement. It's not just about aliens or time travel. It's about the gut feeling that something's off, that modern life made a wrong turn, and no one wants to admit it. The zone wasn't escape, it was confrontation wrapped in fiction. Dripped in irony, delivered by a man in a suit with fire in his chest and a script he wasn't allowed to write any other way. That's what made it revolutionary, not the monsters, but the mirror. The Twilight Zone didn't offer comfort, it offered clarity, and clarity in its rawest form doesn't soothe, it stings. There were no perfect heroes, no rescue helicopters, no deus ex machina, only people. Messy, terrified people making the same mistakes we do. Their consequences arrived in 22 minutes. You couldn't outsmart the lesson, you couldn't charm your way out of it, you couldn't beg the narrator for mercy because the zone wasn't punishing you, it was showing you. And maybe the most unsettling part was that it never yelled. It whispered, "You're selfish, you're blind, you're scared of being seen for what you really are, not out of malice, but out of necessity." Because the Twilight Zone wasn't designed to entertain, it was built to wake you up. You watched a man lose everything to greed, only to realize it was never about the money. You watched a woman alter time itself, only to find out she couldn't outrun her own fear. You watched people destroy each other, not because of monsters or war, but because they expected monsters, and that was enough. And when the credits rolled, you weren't relieved. You were left sitting there, still inside it, still processing the fact that this wasn't fiction. Not really, because the twist wasn't in the story, it was in you. The Twilight Zone never turned off, it just scattered into film, into TV, into algorithms that know what you fear before you do. It's not a relic, it's a virus in the code. A quiet presence in modern storytelling, whispering from the cracks. You hear it in Black Mirror, in Severance, in Mr. Robot, in Inside Number 9, not copies, descendants. But lineage isn't what makes it eternal, voice is, and Rod Serling's voice never belonged to just one era. It was the sound of someone trying to make sense of a world moving too fast, getting too loud, selling too much, forgetting too quickly, and he did it the only way that felt honest. He wrapped his warning in fiction, put it on the air, and hoped someone was listening. Because the scariest part of the Twilight Zone was never the aliens or the time warps, it was the suggestion that reality already was the fiction, that the monsters were real, that the simulation was running, and that the mirror we keep avoiding still shows us exactly what we have become. Serling knew he couldn't stop the trajectory, but he could broadcast something that might catch you in the drift, not with answers, but with the right question, and that's why it still matters. Because somewhere, right now, someone is staring at the edge of a choice, a moral fork in the road, and the Twilight Zone doesn't tell you which way to go, it just turns the lights on. Every time you think you're out of the woods, you hear that faint click, the sound of the dimension shifting again, of the test beginning again, because the zone isn't somewhere you visit, it's where you've been the whole time.